So with those remarks, may I request Professor Srikumar to make his comments.
Thank you, Sangeeta. And I also take this opportunity to thank all of you, particularly my friend Professor Sangeeta Menon, for inviting me here. Because as she said, today is the concluding day, at least for me. Many of you will be staying, all of you will be staying back, but I'll be leaving for the time being. Okay, we'll be meeting again. So this is a nice topic to conclude with, critical thinking. Yesterday we had a brief introduction about this. So it's a nice continuation that we'll begin with that. I was actually thinking about Indian philosophy, particularly when Professor Mishra said he reminded us about the idea of Purva Paksha. And of course, whenever I see a Indian philosopher, this is what comes to my mind: the idea of Purva Paksha, which is very unique. I won't say very unique, very important as far as Indian philosophical traditions are concerned. But today, in this 10 minutes, what I'll try to do is that I'll focus more on Western thought, because today we are working in a global environment. Our works, whatever academics we do, we are trying to communicate with, I think most of the universities, the Scopus indexed publications have become mandatory, which means that you have to communicate with an international audience, not with your Indian peers. Okay, so in that sense, we have to speak in a language which others will understand. So I will begin with the European thought, and probably we'll have a conclusion of this sometime later, because I don't think we'll get time for that. But just to begin with, there is a there are questions like what is critical thinking, and there are of course different answers to this question. One may find very different answers, but all of us would agree that it has something to do with rational thinking. Like religious thinking, for example, a religious person, we don't really consider that critical thinking has a very important role when it comes to the life of a religious person. Okay, not that a religious person is not critical, but at least when that particular activity is carried out. But again, another question at the other extreme is that or do you mean that by being critical, you have to be completely impartial, non-partisan to any particular set of ideas? I would say no, because there again, not always. There are different traditions or different frameworks which from where we can derive this notion of critical ideas, about critical thinking, and how we understand this concept by situating it in philosophical thinking, contemporary philosophical thinking. So I'll begin with, of course, I'll begin with Socrates. And all of you would have heard about him, and he is the darling of all philosophical or students of philosophy, because there is a question which the story, the Oracle of Delphi was asked about who is the wisest among all the Greeks, and the answer was it is Socrates. And Socrates was also sort of bewildered, because he was also wondering why, because I never knew that I am the wisest. And why do they call me wisest? Because I know that I do not know anything. Still they call me the wisest. Then he concludes, yes, that's precisely, there lies the key. I know that I do not know anything. So the very acknowledgement that you know very little, or your ignorance, the acknowledgement of your ignorance is probably the starting point of philosophical reflections or philosophical wisdom. So I would rather say that this is the key to the Socratic idea of critical thinking as well, because we could see Socrates in the writings of Plato and some other writings, that Socrates is continuously, persistently engaged in conversation, in dialogue with other people. And another very important aspect of Socratic thinking is that You won't find Socrates in a classroom. It's not an academic philosophy. You would find him in the marketplace, in marriage ceremonies, where common people, men and women, do go for their day-to-day activities, and there he engages in conversation with people, and in this conversation, though the Platonic account of this conversation occasionally projects him as the master of the whole debate, we could also find that Socrates begins with a very genuine acknowledgement of ignorance. He actually doesn't know. I mean, he's also curious to know. So curiosity is very important. Okay, and the genuine willingness to admit one's ignorance, and the willingness to question oneself, willingness to question other people, others, willingness to question anything which is handed down to you. All these are, projected as the defining features of critical thinking in the Socratic tradition. So Socrates often calls himself as a gadfly. And you know the meaning of a gadfly. What the gadfly does is that when the horse will sleep when it stands, okay, and when it closes its eyes, the fly will come and disturb its, and then it never allows the horse to settle down. So a critical thinker would never allow you to settle down in your ideas. It would always want you to question further, question again and again. Never settle, never be comfortable in your intellectual world. If the moment you think that you are right, you are comfortably right, you have arrived the destination, then probably that is the end of critical philosophical thinking. So you have to keep on pursuing this endeavor of critical thinking, putting yourself in doubt, putting every idea that come to you in doubt. And so all kinds of, I quote unquote, false comforts have to be challenged and persistently questioned and be unsettled. But when you come to the Middle Ages, what you find is that the Catholic Church has its doctrine imposed upon almost the entire Europe was under the control. All departments of life, all institutions in Europe was under the control of Catholic rule. And they controlled everything. They controlled thinking, they controlled religious life, they controlled political life, everything. So people have to, there is no scope there is no need for critical thinking. You just have to accept the creed. And you could see that, this is what people call 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years of dark ages. Nothing has happened. Okay, you just have to, everything pronounced by the church has a didactic value, and you have to just accept that. And the emphasis was on the communion of the God, where you have to be part of a community which advocates a common principle, a set of common principles. And you could see that towards the end of this period, or rather what puts this period to an end is the Protestant movement. The very title itself is very interesting, Protestant movement, and Protestantism originated from within the church itself. A group of priests have given rise to this, and when Martin Luther comes, he comes with a very strong argument. He comes with the idea that the church has hardly any role. The church is not necessarily a mediator between the Bible and the devotee, the man, the individual and the Bible. Between the individual and the Bible, you don't need church to mediate. You can directly access the truth that is pronounced in the Bible. So truth and knowledge can be directly accessed. This is a very interesting notion, because when you say that it can be directly accessed, it presupposes that there is an individual, not a community, but an individual mind with a certain ability of rational critical thinking, which can access the truth individually, directly. So this is, in one sense, you can see that this is the emergence of, individualism in, I'm just trying to very summarize this, because there is no, many more minutes left?
I lost track. So
okay, I'll just try to conclude in less than 5 minutes. So what you come across here is that with the emergence of Protestantism, this individual mind, the critical, rational individual mind also takes birth. And there is one important philosopher who, in this 18th century thinker, whose name, we can't afford to not mention his name. It is Immanuel Kant. Because whenever you talk about critiquing, the very idea of critiquing, we associate it with the works of Immanuel Kant, who has written three monumental critiques: critique of pure reason, critique of practical reason, and critique of aesthetic judgment, covering three important concerns of philosophical thinking: pure reason with epistemology and knowledge and rational thinking, practical reason with deliberations on the good, ethics and morality, and judgment on aesthetics, the experience of beauty. So all the important aspects of philosophical thinking, critical thinking, can be critiqued. This is what the idea of critiquing, which Kant was trying to advocate. And what Kant means by critiquing is that, you make as Sangeeta was mentioning it, you keep an eye, you are actually turning your, philosophers normally what they do is that it's like the camera, they turn towards the world. The eye is towards the world and try to get themselves separated from the world and try to see the world, an objective gaze on the world, okay? So this is what the camera does. So philosophers also used to do that, but now philosophers started turning the camera to themselves. And the mind is a camera, okay? Your mind is the camera. Now the mind is turning its gaze towards itself. So this is critiquing. So it's not just critically trying to understand others, but also endeavoring for a self-critique, turning the gaze towards oneself. So this is what Kant means by transcendental critiques. Okay, so when you talk about critical thinking, this is very important phase. Now, but there is a problem with this Kantian assumption. Kant assumes that the mind can actually do this, that look at the world from a very objective perspective and look at oneself, one's own ability, one's own faculties of looking at one's own faculties of looking from an objective platform, which is highly doubtful. Whether this could be done or not is a very highly doubtful thing. This is what happens in the 20th century. By 20th century, philosophers have lost interest in this kind of a critical endeavor, and what they do is that they turn more towards language, the critique of language. So in Wittgenstein, we'll find this. Philosophy is a critique of language. In Wittgenstein, in his one of the most important works, philosophical works of 20th century, he mentions this. So philosophers are trying to sort of focus on language and whether linguistic expressions do what they were intended to do, or are they trying to sort of take us. Linguistic expressions can create a lot of confusion in us. And this is a very interesting exercise. If you learn analytical philosophy, they have all kinds of works on this. Dr. G. Moore's work and many other philosophers have written a lot about this. And then, but what I'll try to conclude is that I'll try to conclude with another alternative to this Kantian critical thinking, which was adopted by phenomenologist and hermeneutic tradition, where they were trying to go back to the Greek tradition and reinventing the Greeks. And the Greeks were strong in their ontology, while 17th century philosophers were strong in their epistemology. So the Greek philosophy was being reinvented by these thinkers, and critical thinking has been redefined in a different way. So in Gadamer's work, Hans-Georg Gadamer, the German philosopher, who's in his work, you will find that prejudices, normally, we consider to be prejudiced as a wrong thing, as a negative thing. What he says is that to be prejudiced is not necessarily wrong, because we can't help it. We are always prejudiced. We can't help our prejudices. The moment when I say that I'm not prejudiced, that itself is a prejudicial statement. So what he says is that Enlightenment philosophy, 18th century Enlightenment philosophy, in the name of critical thinking, was rather projecting a kind of prejudice against prejudices. Okay, it's a prejudice against prejudices. So you have to actually go beyond that, or rather reinvent a different vocabulary for philosophy so that you can get rid of these issues and begin with the original problems in philosophy. So he goes back to the Socratic world, the spirit of the Socratic dialogue, where there is a genuine, as I began with, there is a genuine interest to know, to understand, to critically evaluate things, and to acknowledge. I mean, it actually begins with the acknowledgement of ignorance. So Gadamer emphasizes on dialogue. So he says that every real knowledge, even critical thinking, can be embedded in a genuine dialogical process. And that's the only way we can solve our problems. Because philosophical thinking is intended to take us to domains which probably we cannot articulate in clear terms. So I'll conclude with a story. Since she mentioned about Ramana Maharshi, I was reminded of this. I'll conclude with this, it'll take hardly 1 minute. Ramana Maharshi has had several disciples all over the world. So they have all decided to celebrate his birthday. And they went and sought his permission. He said he was not very interested. He was totally disinterested. Whatever you want, you do it. So he sort of gave a silent permission for that. And it was a global event. They have invited scholars from different continents, particularly from China and Japan and other places. And there were about 300 delegates participating in the deliberations. And they were printing the notices, the brochures and all that. One day, Maharshi entered and he was just going around and seeing who are the speakers. So he found that, there are 300 speakers. Oh, 300 speakers coming for deliberating about my philosophy. And what is my philosophy? About silence. So philosophy also has to deal with silence. Okay, that's a very important domain. And I don't know what critical philosophy can really gain that. It is definitely self-critiquing. So all criticism is, all critiquing is self-critiquing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Srikumar. That last story of silence almost gave me a tear in my eyes, and thinking, that we live in a world today which is bombarded with words of different kinds. If only we could spend much silence inside and outside, and in between also, we would have been perhaps better people. The world we live in would have been better place. But then, at any case, today I think we may